Mark sat at a small table near the window, his eyes carefully watching the busy diner. The place was familiar, but he had not visited in months. As the owner of this restaurant, he had spent most of his time in meetings and behind a desk, far away from the front lines. He had grown distant from the daily hustle of the diner, and that bothered him. Today, he had decided to change that. He had come in under a different name, dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, hoping no one would recognize him. He wanted to see how the diner was really running, away from the rules and reports. Mark wasn't interested in fancy meetings or quarterly earnings, he wanted to know how his staff was doing. How were they handling the pressures of their jobs? How did the customers feel about the service? The diner was busy, the sound of clattering plates and the chatter of customers filled the air. Mark glanced around, his eyes scanning the room. Most of the waiters and waitresses were moving quickly between tables, carrying food and taking orders. Everything seemed to be running smoothly, but Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His gaze landed on Sarah, one of the waitresses, as she passed by with a tray full of drinks. She moved quickly, but there was something about her that caught Mark's attention. She had a cast on her right hand, and she was trying her best to hide the discomfort on her face as she worked. It wasn't easy to miss the cast was bright white, standing out against her dark uniform. Mark wondered how long she had been wearing it. He watched as Sarah balanced the tray carefully, her movements slightly slower than the others. Every time she reached for something or lifted a plate, she seemed to wince in pain, but she never let it show on her face. She was always smiling at the customers, her friendly attitude never faltering, but Mark could see that it was taking a toll on her. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a worker who seemed to be doing everything she could to keep things running despite her injury. Mark's curiosity grew. Why was she working with a broken hand? Did she not know her worth? Or was there more to the story than he was seeing? As he sipped his coffee, Mark thought about the employees he had in his diner. They were the backbone of the restaurant, and they all worked hard every day. But something about Sarah stood out. It was the way she interacted with the customers, the way she moved quickly even though she had a visible injury. She was clearly determined, but Mark couldn't understand why she hadn't asked for time off or help. After a few more minutes, Mark noticed the pain in her face was becoming more apparent. She was struggling to carry a heavy plate to a table, and it seemed like the weight of the tray was making her hand throb. Mark saw her trying to mask the pain, but it was clear she wasn't doing well. Her hand, wrapped in the thick plaster cast, looked swollen and red, a sign that it was still healing. As Mark continued to observe her, he made a decision. He had to learn more. He wanted to understand why she hadn't taken time off or gone to the doctor. He didn't like seeing one of his employees suffer, especially when it seemed like they were going above and beyond just to make things work. He was the owner, and it was his responsibility to make sure his employees were taken care of. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts as Sarah came to his table to check on him. She smiled politely, and Mark couldn't help but notice how much effort it took for her to be cheerful while clearly in pain. "Is everything okay with your meal?" she asked with a smile. "Everything's great," Mark said, returning the smile. "But I couldn't help but notice your hand. You're working with a cast. What happened?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then her smile faded slightly. She seemed to struggle with how to respond. "Oh, it's nothing, really," she said quickly, trying to downplay the situation. "I just broke it last week. Nothing serious. I'm fine." Mark could tell she was trying to brush it off, but there was something in her eyes that told him there was more to the story. He didn't press further at that moment, but his curiosity was now at its peak. He watched her walk away, trying to manage the pain with every step. Mark felt a mix of concern and confusion. Why hadn't she told anyone about the injury? Why hadn't she taken the time off to get proper treatment? There was clearly more going on beneath the surface, and Mark wanted to know what it was. He finished his meal slowly, his mind racing. There was something about Sarah that made him feel like he needed to do something. The way she worked with such dedication, despite her injury, made him realize that this was a person who deserved more than just sympathy. She deserved to be treated with respect and care, especially by the people who employed her. As Mark sat back in his chair, he knew he had to do something. He couldn't let her keep working through the pain without understanding the full picture. It wasn't just about the diner's success, it was about the people who helped make it successful. The more he thought about it, the more Mark knew that he needed to act. He needed to understand why Sarah was working through her injury, and what he could do to help. He could no longer stay an anonymous observer, he needed to step in and make sure she wasn't suffering in silence. The next day, Mark returned to the diner, feeling an odd mixture of curiosity and concern. He had barely slept the night before, his mind spinning with thoughts about Sarah. How could she be working with a broken hand? He had to know more. He couldn't stand the idea of one of his employees suffering silently, especially when it was clear that she was pushing herself far too hard. This time, he didn't sit at the same table. He chose one further away from the counter, where he could observe without being noticed. The diner was busy again, the familiar hum of voices and clattering plates filling the air. Mark kept his eyes on Sarah, who was hustling between tables, carrying food, refilling drinks, and always smiling at the customers. It was as if nothing was wrong. But Mark could see the strain. Each time she picked up a tray or placed a glass down, her face twisted slightly, as though she were fighting back a sharp pain. Her hand was wrapped in a thick white cast, but it didn't seem to slow her down. She moved with determination, ignoring the discomfort that was probably constant. Mark felt a tightness in his chest. How could she be doing this? Why hadn't she taken time off to heal? After a while, he decided to speak to another waitress, someone who had been working at the diner for a long time. Her name was Linda, and she was sitting behind the counter when Mark approached. "Hey, Linda," Mark started casually, making sure not to raise suspicion. "I noticed Sarah's been working with that cast on her hand. Do you know what happened?" Linda looked over at Sarah, then lowered her voice. "Oh, yeah, that's been going on for a while. She broke her hand about a week ago. It was a pretty bad break, too. She slipped on the floor while trying to stop a fight between two customers." Mark's eyebrows raised in surprise. "She slipped trying to stop a fight," he repeated, shocked by the idea. Linda nodded. "Yeah, she's one of the toughest workers we have here. But she's been pushing through it, even though it's clear she's in a lot of pain. She won't let anyone cover her shifts. She says she needs the money." Mark's stomach sank. Sarah had hurt herself trying to protect the restaurant, but she hadn't gone to the doctor. She hadn't taken the time to rest. All because she was worried about money. "Has she been to the hospital?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Not really. She told me she can't afford it. She's been getting by with just the basic painkillers, but it's not enough." Linda shook her head. "She's too proud to ask for help. It's a shame, really." Mark felt his anger rise. How could someone who worked so hard be left to suffer like this? The diner was his business, but the people who worked here were his responsibility too. He realized that he had been so focused on the numbers, the profits, and the day-to-day running of the diner, that he had missed the most important part, the well-being of his staff. Linda must have noticed the change in Mark's expression because she quickly added, "She's a good girl. She doesn't want to cause trouble, and she doesn't like making people feel sorry for her. But it's getting bad, Mark. You should talk to her." Mark nodded, his mind made up. He couldn't just let this go on. He had to help Sarah, even if it meant stepping in as the owner and doing something she might not be expecting. It was time to stop watching from the sidelines. As Linda turned back to clean some cups, Mark stood up and moved toward Sarah. She was at the counter again, refilling a coffee pot, her eyes fixed on the task at hand. Mark's heart ached as he watched her move with such grace, despite the injury. He knew he had to approach her gently. She had already shown so much strength, and he didn't want to embarrass her. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice soft but firm. She looked up at him, a surprised look crossing her face. "Oh, hi," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "How's everything going with your meal? Is everything okay?" Mark smiled back but couldn't help the concern that crept into his expression. "Everything's great, Sarah. I just wanted to check in with you. I noticed you've been working with that cast on your hand. I've been thinking about it, and I feel like I need to ask, why haven't you taken some time off to get it properly treated?" Sarah's face flushed slightly, and she shifted on her feet. "Oh, it's nothing, really," she said quickly. "I can handle it. I just didn't want to leave anyone short-handed, especially during the busy hours. Besides, I can't afford to take any time off." Mark's heart dropped. "Sarah," he said gently, "you don't have to do this. Your health comes first. You need to take care of yourself. You can't work through an injury like this. It's not good for you." She shook her head, the smile still plastered on her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be fine, really. I've had worse injuries before. I just need to make sure I keep earning. I don't want to let anyone down." Mark took a deep breath, realizing that Sarah wasn't going to let him in easily. She had pride, and it wasn't just about the job, it was about survival. She was doing this because she felt like she had no other choice. "Sarah, listen to me," Mark said, stepping a little closer. "I want you to take the time off. I'll make sure you're paid. You shouldn't have to choose between your health and your work. I can't let you keep doing this." Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of surprise. She opened her mouth to protest, but Mark held up his hand. "You're part of this team, and I'm not going to let you suffer in silence. You've done more than enough for this diner. It's time for us to take care of you." There was a long pause. Mark could see the tears threatening to fall in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Sarah was quiet for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, she nodded, though it seemed like she wasn't quite sure what to say. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't think anyone cared." Mark smiled, his heart full of warmth. "I care, Sarah. And I'll make sure the rest of the team does too." The next morning, Sarah sat in the break room, staring out the small window at the cloudy sky. She hadn't expected Mark to approach her the way he had yesterday. His words had been kind, but part of her felt a little embarrassed. She was used to handling things on her own, to pushing through pain and hardship without asking for help. But deep down, she knew he was right. She couldn't keep going like this, not when her hand was still healing. She sighed, rubbing her fingers gently over the cast. The pain had lessened slightly over the past few days, but it was still there, throbbing every time she tried to do something too quickly. She had learned to live with it, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. The thought of taking time off made her uneasy. What would she do? How would she manage without the money from the shifts? But Mark's offer was hard to ignore. He wanted her to take the time she needed to heal, and he would make sure she was paid. Sarah leaned back in her chair, looking down at the crumpled piece of paper in her hands. It was a note from Mark, the one he had given her after their conversation yesterday. She had been so surprised when he handed it to her that she hadn't fully understood what he was offering. Now, as she read through the note again, it became clear he was serious. He wanted her to take care of herself. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being a burden. She had always been the type of person who worked hard, no matter the cost. She had grown up in a family that had little, and she learned early on that nothing came easy. You had to fight for what you wanted, and you had to push through the tough times. She had always lived by that rule, and it had gotten her this far. But now, she was questioning herself. Was it really worth it? Could she keep sacrificing her health for a job, even one she loved so much? Her thoughts were interrupted when the door opened, and Linda stepped into the room. Linda had been with the diner for years, and Sarah trusted her more than anyone else. Linda had seen her through some tough times, and Sarah knew that if she needed to talk, Linda would always listen. "Hey, Sarah, you okay?" Linda asked, concern written all over her face. Sarah forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking." Linda didn't look convinced. "About yesterday? Mark's offer?" Sarah nodded, her fingers still twisting the paper in her hands. "I don't know, Linda. I've never taken time off like this before. I've always worked through injuries. I'm just not sure." Linda sat down beside her, folding her arms across her chest. "I get it. You're proud. But you know, Mark wouldn't have offered if he didn't really care about you. He's not the kind of guy to just throw money at someone without meaning it." "I know," Sarah replied softly. "But I don't want to seem weak. I don't want to be one of those people who can't handle things." "You're not weak, Sarah," Linda said firmly. "Taking care of yourself isn't weakness. It's smart. You're working yourself into the ground, and if you keep this up, you're going to burn out. Mark's offer is a chance for you to rest and get better without worrying about money. And that's not something to feel guilty about." Sarah looked at Linda, her eyes filled with doubt. "I just don't know how to stop. I've always been the one to push through. If I take time off, what if people think I'm slacking off? What if they think I'm not trying hard enough?" Linda smiled gently. "People who care about you won't think that. And I know Mark doesn't think that. You're one of the hardest workers here, Sarah. No one is going to look down on you for taking care of yourself. Besides, you're no good to anyone if you keep working when you're hurt." Sarah was quiet for a moment, the words sinking in. She knew Linda was right. She had been pushing herself for so long that she had forgotten what it was like to rest, to let herself heal. She had been too focused on the job, too focused on making sure everyone else was taken care of, that she had neglected herself. Mark's voice echoed in her mind. "You've done more than enough for this diner. It's time for us to take care of you." Could she really accept his help? Could she let go of her pride and trust that others would support her, just as she had supported them? Before she could answer her own question, the door opened again, and Mark stepped into the room. He looked at Sarah, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Hey, Sarah," he said softly. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling. I know you're probably still thinking it over, but I just wanted to remind you that the offer stands. If you need time off, you can take it. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Sarah stood up, feeling the weight of the decision press on her. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like someone truly cared. But the old habits, the fear of not being good enough, still held her back. "I don't know, Mark," she said quietly. "I've never been one to just sit around. I don't want to seem like I'm taking advantage of you or anything." Mark shook his head, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You're not taking advantage of me, Sarah. You're doing what's best for yourself. You've earned that right. And if anyone here thinks otherwise, they're wrong." Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. She felt a flood of emotions: relief, fear, gratitude all at once. It was hard to let go of the mindset that had shaped her for so long, but maybe it was time for a change. Maybe it was time to take care of herself for once. With a deep breath, she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll take the time off. But I'm coming back soon." Mark smiled, his eyes warm. "Take as much time as you need. We've got your back." The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty for Sarah. She had agreed to take time off, but the moment she made that decision, a weight lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have to worry about working through the pain. But that didn't make the choice any easier. As she sat at home on her first full day of rest, Sarah couldn't help but feel like she was missing something. She had always been the type to stay busy, to keep her hands moving and her mind focused on the next task. Now, with nothing to do, she felt like a part of herself was missing. She wasn't sure if it was the feeling of being needed or the constant drive to prove that she was capable of handling it all. Either way, it was hard to just sit still. Her apartment was small and quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sarah lay back on the couch, her cast hand resting carefully on the pillow beside her. She closed her eyes, but the thoughts wouldn't stop swirling in her mind. She kept wondering if she had made the right decision. Would the time off hurt her more than it helped? Would Mark and the others at the diner think less of her for taking a break? She had never been one to rest, and now it felt like she was letting everyone down. She stood up, moving toward the kitchen to make herself some tea. The simple act of walking around felt foreign, as if her body didn't quite know how to handle the stillness. She needed something to occupy her mind, but nothing felt like enough. As Sarah sat back down, her phone buzzed with a text message. She picked it up, her heart skipping when she saw that it was from Linda. "Hey, Sarah. Just wanted to check in on you. How are you feeling? Hope you're taking it easy. The diner isn't the same without you. We miss you. Let me know if you need anything, okay?" Sarah's fingers hovered over the screen, a smile tugging at her lips. The kindness in Linda's message made her feel warm, but also a little guilty. She missed the hustle of the diner too, the way everyone worked together to get things done. It felt strange to be away, to not be there when the chaos of a lunch rush hit or when someone needed help with a difficult customer. She typed back quickly, trying to push the guilt aside. "Thanks, Linda. I'm doing okay. It's just weird not being at work. But I know I needed the rest. Hope everyone's doing well. Miss you all too." As Sarah sent the message, she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly doing the right thing. Taking time off seemed like such a luxury, something most people didn't have the chance to do. She felt lucky in some ways but also unworthy. She didn't want to be the kind of person who needed help to get by. She had always believed that if you worked hard enough, you could handle anything. But now, sitting at home, she was starting to see how much she had been pushing herself past her limits. Maybe the rest wasn't just for her hand. Maybe it was for her mind and her spirit too. Later that afternoon, Sarah decided to take a walk. The fresh air might clear her head. She slipped on a jacket, careful not to put too much strain on her cast, and left her apartment. The streets were quiet, a stark contrast to the busy diner she was used to. The weight of her decision hung in the air, but with each step, she felt the pressure easing just a little. She walked past the small park near her building, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. It was peaceful, but still, her mind kept circling back to the same thoughts. Should she go back to work sooner than planned? Could she push herself harder to avoid feeling like a failure? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mark. "Hey, Sarah. Just wanted to check in with you. I know it's probably strange to be away from the diner, but I want you to know that we've got everything under control. Take the time you need to heal, and don't worry about us. We'll be okay." Sarah stopped in her tracks and read the message again. The simple words of reassurance meant more to her than she could express. She had never realized how much she needed to hear that kind of support. It was as though Mark understood the pressure she had been carrying all this time, and now he was telling her that it was okay to let go. For the first time in a while, Sarah felt like she didn't have to prove anything. She could just rest, knowing that her team had her back. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. It wasn't just the relief from the pressure, it was also the realization that Mark and the others truly cared about her. She had been so focused on the job that she had forgotten that the people she worked with were more than just colleagues. They were a team, a family, and they cared about each other. As Sarah continued her walk, she made a promise to herself. She would stop feeling guilty. She would stop thinking she wasn't enough. She had worked hard, and now it was time to let herself heal, both physically and emotionally. She would come back to the diner when she was ready, not because she felt obligated, but because she knew she would be stronger and more capable for it. That evening, Sarah decided to take a long bath. She let the warm water wash away the tension in her muscles, the stress that had built up over the past few weeks. The pain in her hand had eased somewhat, but she still felt the weight of her decision to rest. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As she lay in the tub, Sarah let herself breathe deeply. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to do it all. Sometimes, it was okay to just be. She didn't have to keep pushing until she broke. Her phone buzzed once more, but this time, she didn't look at it immediately. She was learning to be present in the moment, to enjoy the small things. When she finally checked her messages, she smiled at the new text from Linda. "We're all ready to welcome you back when you're feeling better. Take your time, Sarah. You deserve it." For the first time in a long time, Sarah didn't feel like she was failing. She was simply taking care of herself, and that was enough. The days passed slowly for Sarah. Each morning, she woke up with the same feeling of uncertainty, a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that her body was getting the rest it needed, and guilt that she wasn't working, that she wasn't helping her team at the diner. She had always been the one to show up, no matter the circumstances, no matter how tired she felt. Now, as the days stretched on and her hands slowly healed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She tried to relax, to enjoy the time off, but it was hard. The quiet apartment felt too still. The air felt heavy with thoughts she couldn't quiet. The silence in her apartment made her reflect on all the things she had been running from, things that had piled up in her life without her realizing it. Her body had forced her to slow down, but her mind didn't stop. She constantly replayed the decision to take time off, questioning whether she had made the right choice. Every now and then, a wave of doubt would hit. Maybe she should go back earlier than planned. Maybe she was being weak by resting when there was work to be done. The idea of someone else taking her place at the diner made her uncomfortable. The thought of not being there when the rush of customers came in, or when the team needed her help, made her uneasy. But it wasn't just about her hand anymore. It wasn't just about the physical pain. It was something deeper. She had spent so much time pushing herself beyond her limits, trying to prove she was strong enough, capable enough. It had become a habit, one that she didn't know how to break. But as the days went by, Sarah started to realize that maybe it wasn't about proving anything anymore. Maybe it was time to take a step back and let herself heal, not just physically, but emotionally too. One afternoon, Sarah sat by the window, looking out at the gray sky. She had been on her own for so long that it was hard to remember what it felt like to have someone else truly care. Linda had sent her a message earlier that morning, just checking in again. Sarah appreciated it, but it made her realize something else too. She wasn't used to people checking in on her. She was used to being the one who cared for others, not the other way around. And that realization made her heart ache. She wasn't sure how to receive care. She wasn't sure how to let someone in. She thought back to Mark's words, the ones he had said to her when he offered her the time off. "You've done more than enough for this diner. It's time for us to take care of you." At the time, those words had felt foreign to her. She wasn't used to being taken care of. But now, sitting alone in her apartment, she could feel the weight of his kindness. She could feel it pressing on her heart, making her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to be vulnerable. Sarah hadn't fully realized how much of herself she had been giving away until she stopped. She had been working so hard for so long, trying to hold everything together, that she hadn't noticed how little she was taking care of herself. She had put everyone else's needs before her own, and now that she had stopped, she felt lost. She didn't know how to rest. She didn't know how to care for herself the way she had cared for others. That evening, as she sat at the small kitchen table, she picked up her phone and stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the number, unsure. Then, with a deep breath, she dialed Linda's number. She needed to talk. She needed to hear a voice, to hear someone else tell her that it was okay to be human, that it was okay to need help. "Hello." Linda answered quickly. "Hey, Linda," Sarah said, her voice a little hesitant. "It's Sarah." "Hey. How are you doing? I've been thinking about you." Linda's voice was warm, full of kindness, and it made Sarah feel a little less alone. "I'm okay," Sarah said quietly. "I've just been thinking a lot, I guess." "Thinking about what?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "I guess I've been thinking about everything. About work. About taking time off. I'm just not sure I made the right decision. It feels weird, not being there. I don't know how to just stop." Linda was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could almost hear her thinking. "I get it. You're used to pushing yourself. But Sarah, you're not a machine. You don't have to keep going like this forever. You've earned the break. You've given so much of yourself to the diner, to the people you work with. Now it's time to take care of yourself." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to hearing words like that, and they felt like a balm to her soul. "But what if they don't need me?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "What if they get along fine without me?" "They'll get along just fine," Linda said with a laugh. "But that doesn't mean they don't miss you. It doesn't mean you don't matter. It just means you've created a team that's strong enough to keep going. And you'll come back when you're ready. But only when you're ready." Sarah sat back in her chair, letting Linda's words sink in. For the first time in days, she felt a small spark of peace inside her. Maybe she didn't have to be there every minute of every day. Maybe she didn't have to be the one to keep everything together all the time. Maybe it was okay to just be Sarah, to rest, to heal. "I guess you're right," Sarah said softly. "Maybe I just needed someone to tell me that. I've always been the one to take care of things. It's hard to let someone else help me." "It's hard for all of us," Linda said. "But it's important. You don't have to carry everything on your shoulders alone. You've got a team, Sarah. And we're all here for you, whether you're working or taking time off." Sarah smiled through the phone, her heart feeling lighter. Maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was about giving herself permission to be human, to need help, to rest. "I'll be okay," Sarah said, a little more confident now. "Thank you, Linda." "Really?" "You're welcome, Sarah. And when you're ready, we'll be here, ready to welcome you back." After hanging up, Sarah sat quietly for a moment, letting the weight of her decision settle. It was okay to rest. It was okay to need help. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone. She could take the time she needed to heal physically, mentally, and emotionally. And when she was ready, she would return to the diner, not as someone who was broken, but as someone who had learned to take care of herself. The days of rest had been slow, but Sarah began to feel the effects of the time off. Her hand, though still in a cast, was starting to feel better. The pain was no longer constant, and she could move her fingers a little more easily. But it wasn't just her hand that was healing, it was her mind. The constant pressure she had put on herself to keep going, to always be the one to show up, had started to lift. But even with the physical healing, Sarah felt conflicted. She had been away from the diner for almost a week, and as much as she knew she needed the break, she missed being there. She missed the familiar clink of plates and the hum of conversation. She missed the laughter and the moments of chaos that always made the job feel so alive. She was a part of something bigger than just the job, and it felt strange not to be there. Still, Sarah was learning to let go, to trust that the team could handle things without her. She knew that she had done everything she could to make sure the diner ran smoothly. She had helped train the staff, built strong relationships with the customers, and always did her best to show up when things got tough. But now, it was time for others to take over, and for her to take care of herself. On the 6th day of her break, Sarah decided to visit the diner. She wasn't ready to go back to work, but she felt like she needed to see it with her own eyes, to reassure herself that everything was running smoothly. She also wanted to see Mark again, to thank him for the support he had shown her. As she entered the diner, the familiar scent of fresh coffee and sizzling food greeted her. The bustling sounds of the kitchen and the wait staff chatting with customers filled the air, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. The place was as busy as ever, but there was something different now. Sarah felt like she was on the outside looking in. She walked up to the counter, where Linda was busy wiping down the counter. Linda looked up and smiled when she saw Sarah. "Hey! Look who decided to drop by," Linda said, her voice cheerful. "How are you feeling?" "I'm doing better," Sarah replied, giving her friend a small smile. "Still healing, but I wanted to stop by and see how things are going." "I miss it here." Linda raised an eyebrow. "You miss the chaos, huh?" "I knew it." "You're a true diner girl." Sarah chuckled, but the truth of Linda's words hit her harder than she expected. She did miss it. She missed the fast pace, the constant motion, and the feeling of being needed. It was hard to admit that she had been so tied to the work that she hadn't allowed herself to step back and breathe. "I'll admit it," Sarah said, her voice a little softer now. "It feels weird being away. But I know I need to take care of myself, too." "You're doing the right thing," Linda said with a smile. "You've earned this time off. You've been working non-stop for months, and no one here would think less of you for taking a break." Sarah nodded, grateful for Linda's words. But just as she was about to say something else, Mark walked up to the counter. He had a relaxed, easygoing smile on his face, and his presence made Sarah feel both comforted and nervous. He was the reason she was sitting here in the first place. He had been the one to offer her the time off, the one to tell her that it was okay to step back. "Sarah," Mark greeted, his voice warm. "It's good to see you. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Sarah replied, looking up at him with a small but genuine smile. "I just wanted to stop by and thank you again. I've been taking it easy, and it's been hard, but also exactly what I needed." Mark smiled, his eyes reflecting the understanding that Sarah needed. "I'm glad to hear that. I know it wasn't easy for you to step back, but I think it was the right choice. You've been a huge part of this diner, Sarah. We all appreciate everything you do here." His words made her heart swell, but they also made her feel a little vulnerable. She wasn't used to being praised for just taking care of herself. It felt unfamiliar, like a part of her identity that she hadn't fully realized she was missing. "I appreciate you saying that," Sarah said softly. "I've always been the one who pushes through, no matter what. I guess it's just hard for me to let go, you know." Mark nodded. "I understand. It's hard to stop when you've always been the one to keep things moving. But you don't have to do it alone. We're a team here, and that means we all support each other, whether we're working side by side or giving someone the space they need to heal. Those words hit home for Sarah. She had spent so much time thinking about the diner as a place where she had to keep things together, where she had to be the one to hold it all up. But Mark was right. It was a team, and teams work together, not just as individuals. She wasn't alone, and it was okay to take a step back. I think I'm starting to understand that, Sarah said, her voice quieter now. I've always felt like I had to do everything myself, but I'm realizing it's okay to let others help. Exactly, Mark said, giving her a nod of approval. And when you're ready, we'll be here to welcome you back. No rush, though. Take your time. Sarah smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Thanks, Mark. Really. I don't know what I would have done without your support. You don't need to thank me, Mark said with a shrug. I'm just doing what any good leader would do. It's about making sure everyone is okay physically and mentally. You're part of this family, and we want to see you happy and healthy. Mark's words sank deep into Sarah's heart. She realized that for the first time in a long time, she didn't have to fight for her place here. She didn't have to prove her worth by working herself to the bone. She was already valued, and that was enough. As Sarah turned to leave the diner, she felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't rushing back to work, but she wasn't running away from it either. She was allowing herself the time to heal, to rest, and to return when she was ready, stronger and more balanced than before. And as she stepped out into the fresh air, Sarah finally felt like she was in control of her own journey, knowing that it was okay to take care of herself first. The week that followed was a turning point for Sarah. She continued to rest, allowing her hand to heal and her body to regain the strength it had lost. Though the physical pain was gradually fading, she still felt the weight of the decisions she had made, the choice to stop, to rest, to accept help. It was still a struggle for her, but each day felt a little easier. She spent her mornings reading, something she hadn't done in ages. The quiet hours allowed her time to reflect on her life, her choices, and the path she wanted to take moving forward. It was a strange feeling being still and doing nothing for so long, but Sarah slowly began to appreciate it. It was the first time in years that she hadn't been rushing from one task to the next, constantly busy, always trying to prove she was capable. She wasn't just living for the work anymore. She was learning how to live for herself. But despite the calm, Sarah couldn't help but miss the diner. She missed the energy, the laughter, and the camaraderie of the staff. The place had been a big part of her life for so long that it felt strange not to be there. Yet, as much as she wanted to return, she knew she wasn't ready just yet. She needed to heal fully, physically and emotionally. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to truly rest, without the pressure of needing to be anywhere or do anything. One evening, as Sarah sat by her window, watching the sun set over the city, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. "Hey, Sarah. Just wanted to check in again and see how you're feeling. We've missed having you around, but don't rush back. Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready." The simple message brought a smile to Sarah's face. Mark had always been understanding, but this message felt different. It was more than just a check-in. It was a reminder that she didn't have to prove anything. No one was expecting her to rush back into work. The diner would be just fine without her for a little longer. She set the phone down, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't just the physical healing that had changed, it was the way she thought about herself. She had spent so many years pushing herself, ignoring her needs, and living in a constant state of motion. But now, for the first time, she was starting to understand that it wasn't about doing everything, it was about being able to do things well when it mattered. As the weekend approached, Sarah felt a quiet confidence growing within her. She wasn't rushing to return to the diner, but she was no longer dreading the idea of going back. She knew that when the time was right, she would be ready. She wouldn't be coming back as the person who had to prove herself through endless work. She would return as someone who had learned to take care of herself, someone who understood the importance of balance. On Sunday morning, Sarah decided to stop by the diner again. It was a warm, sunny day, and she felt ready to see the team again, even if she wasn't quite ready to work. As she entered the familiar space, the sounds of laughter and clinking dishes greeted her like an old friend. The diner was just as bustling as before, but it didn't feel overwhelming this time. There was a sense of calm in the air, a reminder that life could go on, even when she wasn't there. She spotted Linda behind the counter, and their eyes met. Linda's face lit up when she saw Sarah. "Sarah! You're back!" Linda exclaimed, her voice full of excitement. "Not back to work, just visiting," Sarah said with a smile. "I wanted to see everyone." Mark appeared from the kitchen, his eyes bright when he saw Sarah. "Hey, look who's here," he said, walking over to greet her. "How are you feeling?" "I'm doing well," Sarah replied, her smile genuine. "I've been taking it easy. I just needed some time to clear my head and rest." "We've missed you around here," Mark said. "But I'm glad you're taking the time to heal. No one's in a rush for you to come back, Sarah. When you're ready, we'll be here." Sarah felt a sense of gratitude swell inside her. She had been so worried about letting everyone down, but hearing Mark's words made her realize how much the team truly cared for her. They weren't just co-workers, they were a family, and they wanted her to be okay, not just as an employee, but as a person. "I appreciate that," Sarah said, her voice soft. "I'm learning that it's okay to take a step back. It's something I've never really done before, but I'm getting used to it." "Good for you," Linda said with a smile. "It's about time you gave yourself some space. You're one of the hardest workers I know, but you deserve a break." Sarah nodded. "I've been so focused on the work for so long that I forgot what it was like to just be. But I'm learning. I'm figuring it out." Mark clapped his hands together. "Well, when you're ready to come back, we'll be here. But for now, take all the time you need. You've earned it." As Sarah stood there, surrounded by the warmth of the diner and the people who had supported her, she realized that it wasn't just about going back to work. It was about going back when she was truly ready, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She had learned that it was okay to take care of herself, that it was okay to rest, and that sometimes the best thing you could do for others was to take care of your own well-being first. "I will be back soon," Sarah said, her voice steady. "But when I do come back, I'll be better, stronger, healthier, and ready to take on whatever comes my way." Mark smiled, and Linda gave her a thumbs up. "We're looking forward to it, Sarah. But for now, enjoy your time. You deserve it." As Sarah walked out of the diner that day, she felt lighter. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't stressed. She was exactly where she needed to be. The future was still ahead of her, but for the first time, she was taking it one step at a time, knowing that it was okay to pause when necessary. When Sarah returned to the diner, it would be a new beginning for her and for the team. But this time, she would be coming back as someone who had learned that true strength came not from always pushing forward, but from knowing when to take a break and let herself heal.